Hello. We're still not quite back to doing the history of the four assay offices. I know we've dealt with Chester and Newcastle. We've still got Exeter and York to come, but I'm just waiting to borrow some pieces because I'm sadly lacking in those areas, I'm afraid. Things have been flying out, and why not? Because there's very little to buy at the moment. But I'm going to talk about fish servers. Just because I have an exceptional pair to show you. Fish servers, for those of you who don't know, are a long-bladed server, a knife. Yeah, isn't that impressive? Yes, I know. You won't often see one like that, believe me. And the accompanying fork. Splendid things. I'll sort of leave those there because it's much nicer to look at the objects than it is at me. I know that much. In the 18th century, a single fish server comes in. I think Paul de Lamery was one of the first people to make one. We'll put those down because I'm going to poke myself in the face with that if I keep going. Paul de Lamery made a fish server, single-bladed, all pierced with fish in about 1740. Had a sort of Hanoverian stem, long Hanoverian stem, a flat blade, all pierced with fish, so you could serve the fish to it. And that's the form that persists at the first half of the 18th century. After that, that blade starts to elongate and become triangular. So you get people like William Plummer specialising, mainly because the specialist skill with the production of all these things is piercing and engraving, and Plummer was a specialist piercer, really, even though he made baskets and other things like that. And that goes throughout the 18th century. In the 19th century, at the beginning of the Victorian period, you get the introduction of the fork. And this also coincides with the introduction of the fish knife and fork. That comes in about sort of 1820, 1825. There are no hard and fast rules. There are always exceptions. The minute you say fish knives and forks didn't exist until a certain date, someone will turn up with a peculiar pair that were commissioned for someone in particular that are 20 years earlier. But generally speaking, in general use, they come in the 1830s, 1840s. Very much the province of the middle classes. All of this stuff, grapefruit, melon knives and forks, grapefruit spoons, fish knives and forks, excess, industrial excess, a wealthy middle class wanting to show that they've achieved something by adorning their dinner table, their dining table with all sorts of things, which actually the upper classes, the nobility, the aristocracy, felt was slightly beneath them. It was beyond the pale to have a fish knife and fork in some circles. And actually, when you have fish eaters, a fish knife and fork, individual ones to eat from your plate, often you will, in large services of important families, just get 2 additional table forks. The fish knife, in that sense, was seen as a bad thing, a poor show. You wouldn't see Bertie Wooster using a fish knife and fork, let's put it that way. Let's get back to these. These were made in Sheffield, and they've got the date letter for 1861 to 62. Now, it's interesting that throughout the life of the Sheffield Assay Office, right up until 1975, when everything was standardised, the date letter was actually changed the first Monday in July. So whilst we would say that's the date letter for 1861, it was actually used in a greater proportion of 1862. Now, you may notice, I think we'll get quite a good shot of this. This fellow here, under a crown with angels. Angels here, standing beside him. Angels here blowing a trumpet. He has passed on, and he's royal. And it's 1861 to 62. It is Prince Albert. It is odd on ostensibly something you would use at your dining table to serve fish to have the head of a dead monarch. but these were never really meant to be used, which is why they're in such, astonishing. They're big. Look, I mean, it goes on forever. These weren't ever meant to be used. These actually coincide with Albert's death, which was on the 14th of December 1861. But then only a few months later was the Great London Exhibition, the International Exhibition of 1862. Now, these were made by Martin Hall and Company. The pattern of the handles with this, if you can see it, mask, this Green Man device, and all this sort of neo-Renaissance strap work that was fashionable at the period. This is a standard Martin Hall and Company pattern handle. I've seen this in different sizes. You can see it on individual knives and forks. You can see it on large melon knives and forks. Often it's gilt or parcel gilt. The blade, however, is bespoke. The blade and the tines in both of these. And these would have been made purely for exhibition. At a time there was outpouring, of course, of grief. We all know what Queen Victoria was like and how she instituted mourning on a sort of almost national scale. So it was quite fitting that in the exhibition they should reference that. This was never meant. We were never meant to put dear old Prince Albert's head underneath the halibut. That would have been disgraceful. But these, you can imagine, were exhibited in 1862 to show everything that Martin Hall and Company could do to elaborately decorate domestic silver. I mean, think about these. You only ever use them for serving fish, but look at the work. The work is breathtaking. I'm going to turn them over in a minute and show you the back. But if you notice the figure, which is on both of these, of the angel blowing the trumpet, heralding his, there's the royal arms underneath, all pierced and engraved. But on the back, which is unusual, you have the back of the angel. And there are the wings, and the feathers are picked out. It is very much conceived as a sculptural item, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if they were exhibited, not in a case, but actually on stands, and you could have walked around them in the round and appreciated all of the tremendous amount of work that's gone into them. And also when you see where the hallmarks are, they're struck very prominently at the front. Often, same here at the front, often these will be tucked away at the back if it's more domestic, so they don't interrupt the decoration. But Martin Hall and Company, who made these, wanted you to know that they'd made them. This is a form of advertising. These would never have been used, have never been used. This is why they've survived in such extraordinary condition. It's also quite unusual to have the handles in silver, filled silver. Many of you will say, well, I've got a pair in filled silver. Yes, but the most elaborate of these were often carved ivory or carved mother of pearl. But it was going to extra expense, to extra elaboration just to have these handles. These are die stamped. So all of this is, the blade is hand wrought. It will have a long, basically tine that goes in there to set into the handle. And all of this piercing and engraving is hand done. It is bespoke. It is exhibition quality. You will never find a Victorian fish server better than this. These are, anything made for an exhibition, it is the best. The handles, however, are from stock, and these are die stamped in steel dies, again beautifully finished, and it is the largest size of this particular pattern that I've ever seen. But again, this could be replicated. So when you saw this at the exhibition and were hugely impressed, and you went to Martin Hall and Company and said, I would love some fish servers, but possibly not with, his, Prince Albert's head on it, because that's a bit gruesome, but maybe with fish or bulrushes or dolphins. They did all sorts of wonderful designs. But you could get this shape of blade, you could get this pattern of handle. There is a commercial element to it. But I was very, very lucky to find these many years ago, and I couldn't quite believe it. Because they are literally bigger than my head, and lots of people will tell you what a big head I have got. My God, it looks like I'm looking through the bars of a prison cell there. So I just thought you'd like to see them. There isn't anything hugely demonstrable in terms of technique, apart from the fact that they are just the most fabulous bit of engraving, Victorian engraving. Got all the flags of the nation here, and all the detail at the back and all the piercing, just amazing. But that's just for this week until I can get some, borrow some more things, and we'll get back onto the Exeter and York track. And also, by way of a filthy commercial plug, as we are getting close to Halloween, if any of you like the work of M.R. James, you'll probably be disgusted in how I've ripped him off with this, which is my own take on the, let's call it, it says ghost stories, antique ghost stories. They're antiquarian tales. But the one thing that, because I love M.R. James, the one thing I always lamented was that it didn't feature antiques in it more heavily. So I have corrected his slight omission, awful grammar, and spelling notwithstanding. So that's on eBay, because no good bookshop will touch it. I'm quite right of them too. So that's available on eBay if you want a copy. It's a lot of money, but it is hardback. It does have a dust cover. I had to have them privately printed, and they did cost an absolute fortune. There aren't many left. When I'm dead, they'll be worth a fortune. But there we go. Next week, something else. Hopefully I'll have discovered some hidden treasure in an auction next week, although looking through the catalogues, that's not terribly likely. But good antiques hunting, and until next week, goodbye.